Hello and welcome, everyone. Hello, everyone. If you could ever just grab your seats as you're coming in. I'd like to welcome you all to We Are All More Alike Than We Are Different, an interfaith conversation, and thank everyone for coming out tonight, as well as our crowd live streaming from UW Cross and from home. Just a quick note before we get started, any students who need a signature as proof of attendance, you can find somebody wearing a volunteer lanyard after the presentation. I'm Taysir Al-Hindi. My family and I started the nonprofit Solomon Song. Our mission is to foster community connections that fortify our belief that we are all more alike than we are different, hence the title of tonight's event. We promote a healthy mind and body. We celebrate diversity, and we are working to reduce stigma in its many forms. Tonight, we have partnered with the Muslim Student Association, the Lutheran Campus Center, and the Islamic Center of Winona to bring to you an amazing panel over here. Now more than ever, our world is divided. However, this is not a political conversation, rather an opportunity to learn more about faith customs that we might not be familiar with, to break down barriers and to create a deeper understanding of what Maya Angelou refers to as our human family.
Human family. I note the obvious differences in the human family. Some of us are serious, some thrive on comedy, some declare their lives are lived as true profundity, and others claim they really live the real reality. The variety of our skin tones can confuse, bemuse delight, brown and pink and beige and purple, tan and blue and white. I've sailed upon the 7 seas and stopped in every land. I've seen the wonders of the world, not yet one common man. I know 10,000 women called Jane and Mary Jane. I've not seen any two who really were the same. Mirror twins are different, although their features jibe, and lovers think quite different thoughts while lying side by side. We love and lose in China. We weep on England's moors and laugh and moan in Guinea and thrive on Spanish shores. We seek success in Finland, are born and die in Maine. In minor ways we differ, in major we're the same. I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike.
All right. From the Buddhist tradition, we have Reverend Paul Keisho Stern. Representing Catholicism, Deacon Justin Green. Hindu is Bhaskar Iyengar. Judaism, we have Barb Nagel. From the Lutheran Campus Center, we have Pastor Corinne Halut. And representing Islam, we have John Emery. They're going to talk a little bit about themselves.
They're going to speak a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to open it up to the audience to ask any questions that you have. And then we'll follow up with conversation and refreshments outside for anybody who's interested in joining something.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, my name is Muhammad Al-Hindi, and I had the distinct pleasure of moderating today's conversation. We will start by each one of our panelists will speak a little bit, and then from there we'll open it for Q&A. After the Q&A, we are hoping to mingle and gather in the front area, a little bit of food, a little bit of hot drinks, and hopefully we can have more conversation about we are more alike than we are different. With that, we'll start here.
Hello, I am Pastor Corinne Hollett of the Lutheran Campus Center.
I'm a mama to Eleonora, who's 7 and in the Spanish language immersion program at Madison Elementary, and to Micah, who's in preschool at Central Lutheran. I've been at the Lutheran Campus Center for 3.5 years, and before that I served in a congregation in Wisconsin for 3 years. So I grew up ELCA, which is Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and in college I claimed that faith expression as my own. I was very involved with my campus ministry, but even more so, I claimed that through dear friends, such as my friend Ben, who was more Lutheran than the sky is blue. He wrote a song coming on our senior year called Grace, which to me just describes the very essence of Lutheran theology. And the chorus goes, it's all grace. All the love you, as in God, give, all the love you show, it's all grace. And he speaks about how he realizes there's nothing that he can do or that we can do to come to God, but that God is always coming down to us. Now, the fancy Lutheran theological term for that is justification alone by grace alone, but I like Ben's version of it's all grace. And for me, it has to do with this arrow that a woman named Kelly Fryer spoke of in a book on Lutheranism, that God is always coming down to us 100%. And so Lutherans believe that there's nothing that we can do to go up to God. Like, we aren't working at earning salvation, but that it's just this ridiculous, scandalous grace that God comes and claims us and gives us that identity that so much of our world tries to heap onto us, whether that's our parents, our community, our weight, our image, our credentials, try to claim our identity. And we believe that God's grace claims us first. And then that we go out to share that with the world. So it's not that I show service or love toward my neighbor as a way of trying to earn anything, but as a response and thanksgiving to that ridiculous grace of God. One of the other things I love about being a Lutheran is this theology of the cross. That's the fancy term for it. But so much of our culture focuses on prosperity and glory and trying to get ahead and saying, oh, God has blessed me, so I have a car, a really nice car. God's blessed me with a bunch of cash or whatever that may be. And I just think that's ridiculous. For me, I have, in those moments of life where you wonder, what is this all for? And you're at your rock bottom, for me, that's where God has met me. And like those moments of despair and darkness and death, that's where God is most revealed to me. So that's fancy language theology of the cross. Lastly, I want to share, I love that I'm able to wrestle in my faith, that I'm able to doubt and ask questions. So for me, doubt is not the opposite of faith, but it is an integral part of faith. I am very skeptical of people who have easy answers. And so I find myself liking that character or disciple in the Bible called Doubting Thomas. My internship supervisor called him Honest Thomas because he was brave enough to ask questions and to doubt. So that's where I kind of land. And I'm sorry, I do have one more thing. So my faith to me is a way of life. Like at its best, it's meant to be a way of life. It's not meant to be an answer book. It's not meant to be an easy out or a hobby, but really is to like influence everything I do in my life. And my life, I hope, is a prayer back to God in every action in return thanksgiving.
Thank you. They told me to keep it short, so I prepared some notes. My name is John Emery, so I'm here representing the Muslim community. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you all. I'd like to begin by thanking Solomon Solomon for asking me to speak here. Thank you to Carolyn Muhammad for organizing the event. And also thank you to my fellow panelists. I'm honored and humbled to be sharing this space with you. As a convert to Islam, I've always been struck by the similarities between Islam and the Catholic tradition in which I was raised. One thing I always emphasize in conversations about Islam is that I didn't convert for any negative reasons. I didn't have to abandon Jesus and his message of mercy and love. In fact, the Quran, the holy book of Islam, relates how the angel Gabriel visited the Virgin Mary with the good news, and also relates the story of Jesus' birth. As a veteran of the U.S. Army, I swore an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. The core values expressed in the preamble of the Constitution, justice, tranquility, welfare, and liberty, are fully consistent with the teachings of Islam. And those are the end of my notes. I'd also like to say that Islam, the word itself means peace. Islam is a way of life for Muslims. We try to organize our daily lives around the practice of Islam. And I also want to say categorically that violence plays no part in the practice of Islam. So I would like to say that Islamic extremism, terrorism so-called, plays no part. And we condemn, on the behalf of 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide, we condemn any sort of violence committed in the name of Islam or in any, or in the name of any other religious tradition. So thank you.
I'll take this. Sorry. Yeah, it works. Everybody can hear me, I'm sure. My name is Paul. I go by Keisho as well, depending on where it is that we end up running into each other's stern. I am a priest in a Zen tradition. I'm also the Associate Director of Enrollment Services, a happy husband, a father of 2 smiling kids that are looking at me from out in the audience as well. I come from the Zen Buddhist stronghold of Bemidji, Minnesota. Yeah. Wait, it gets better, from a Lakota Jewish background, so it makes it all okay. Yeah. I've led a really blessed life. I've been able to have the opportunity to travel and learn from a variety of people in a variety of settings. And much of that life has been around exploring these questions, these deep questions about our human condition. You know, where are we? Where are we in this strange journey anyway? How did we get here? And, what happens next? Not like next, like way far next, but even what happens in the next 10 minutes. I think that Zen and Buddhist traditions spoke to me tremendously in that, in just the pathway, the foundation that it ended up laying for me to end up having language to start to address that with, to start to look at what it meant to be awake inside of our lives, like really awake. Every instant of your life engaged in that practice of living compassionately and loving everybody who you end up encountering, that shared co-creative experience that we're at once both a part of and inseparable from. I think that piece of that journey has been something that's spoken to me for a number of years, and something that I feel greatly honored to be able to share with our community through Manitou Center that we end up doing here, through Zen Garland that ends up being out east, but also with all of the interactions that we ended up having in the beginning of this event, from our interviews where we're listening to the foundations that ended up, really forming the pathways for everybody's practice on the panel here, to the interactions that we ended up having in conversation, even in planning this event. All of that to me seemed like almost a song that we were sharing, a chorus of people coming together, if you would, that really put together this tapestry of practice, I think, that extends beyond, any sort of label that you end up putting on the experience. That heart, that core essence that ends up being the tapestry underlying whatever language you end up using. I really feel like we dipped our toes into in coming here tonight. So I once again want to thank everybody for coming out and giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about ourselves, but also to engage in a conversation that I hope really ends up taking place over the rest of our lives and informing us as we end up going forward. So thank you.
My name is Bhaskar Iyengar. I teach computer science here at Winona State. And I grew up Hindu, born and brought up in India, and I was brought up Hindu. And I love the religion because there's a lot of songs, a lot of colors, a lot of interesting figures, mythological stories. all kinds of things that a child would love. And as you grow up, you learn a little bit more about the philosophical and or spiritual background behind that. So in that sense, it's more of flowing with what you were born with, and then enjoying it and experiencing it, and hopefully transmitting it to others so that they can enjoy it as well. Today's conversation was, we are more alike than different. Well, it could be a theory, if you want to call it. We just saw the video where it's indicated every individual looks different. So how are we alike? And I was trying to reconcile, do I actually believe it and experience it in any way? And I thought about an example. I grew up in India in a neighborhood where India is multilingual, many languages in there. So our neighbors would speak some language which I had no idea. I had no clue, and it looked weird. Their accent was weird. Their mannerisms was weird. Honestly, to me. But here's the thing that happened. After that, when I went for engineering, I went to a different state, which was a different language. After 4 years in that place, I actually could understand that language. I could understand their poetry. I could understand their music. And I said, no, they were not weird. They were not different. They were talking the same language as I was, just it sounded different. So in some sense, all of us are practicing religion in our own way, because that's how we were brought up. You speak French because you were brought up in a French country, not because you want to be French or that's any better than any other. So in that sense, if I am practicing Hindu, it's because I was born into that religion or that environment. So from that sense, I believe truly that we are all practicing the same religion, except differently, right? So using that difference, which is apparent, not true, and using that for divisive purposes is not the right thing to do. So I think this conversation hopefully will help us understand, if we know better, if we have a chance to participate with someone else and learn, and we'll realize that we are the same. We are a whole lot alike than we are in any way different. Thank you.
I'm Barbara Nagel, and I'm speaking to you tonight for the Jewish community. And I think I'm going to begin by making a little bit of a distinction about the Jews, because we've talked about many faith paths tonight. And if you're a Jew, you can be a Jew that practices Judaism, but you can be a Jew who doesn't practice Judaism, but you're always a Jew. So we don't call Judaism a faith, we don't call it an ethnicity, we don't call it a nation, we simply call it a family. So if you're a Jew, you are part of the Jewish family, in the same way that if you're estranged from your own family, you still belong to that family, even if you're not connected to them. So I'm going to speak for the Jewish family tonight. And I think that the thing for me that's most special about being Jewish is the idea of B'Tselem Elohim, which means made in God's image. That the acknowledgement that there is in all of us a spark of God. And when we pray, we're basically, whatever we say about God, he makes smooth the rough paths, and he raises up the downfall, and he provides support for those who are stumbling. We're really, when we pray those things, we're really sort of setting ourselves up for our own action, because that's the extension of being a person who has the spark of God in them, is that then our task here is to be godlike here. The other thing that I love about my religion is our basic prayer, which is Shema Yisrael. Listen, Israel, God is our God, God is one. And I think that, as we've heard tonight, people speak about their various faiths, but these are many paths but they all of us, I feel, find our path one of righteousness and one of value. But I think that we all feel that we're making our way to God or to whatever comes beyond this in our own way. I'll finish and let Justin Green here have a little bit of time by just saying that one of the prayers that a Jew says every day is called Modeh Ani, and it's a thank you prayer. The reason I like it so much is that you say to God, thanks for restoring my life to me. And it's very old, so I'm sure that it was written in a time when people really thought that sleep was a type of death. But it thanks God for restoring our souls to us. And then it acknowledges that we're at the beginning of a new day. So today we can do something different. So if yesterday wasn't a good day for us, today can be a good day. So the acknowledgement of God, thanking him for restoring our life, and then starting a new day. So I'll pass it on.
Thank you. Well, I get to go last. I came in and looked at the signs and I said, uh-oh, am I first or am I last? Because it's a different presentation depending upon the order in which you do things. So when Mohammed went to Corinne first, I said, okay, now we can do this. One of the things that I listened to was the word kept coming back, way. We're on a journey somewhere. I suspect there isn't any of us in this room who hasn't gone out one night and wondered, why are we here? Where am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And religion, faith, is one of the ways in which we can develop answers to those questions. And we're here tonight because we know that there's a lot of diversity among us. We want to make sure that we understand how other people develop answers to those fundamental questions. I think the biggest thing we have to fear in our nation, in our world, is ignorance. Because when we don't know something, we're afraid. And it's not just the physics test that you have tomorrow. When you don't know something, you're afraid of it. You meet someone who's a different color, speaks a different language, came from another different part of the world, has a different religion. And there's this element of fear. Sometimes it's a respectable fear. Lord, please help me and keep me from somehow or other insulting this person accidentally. And sometimes it's a not very healthy fear. That if I don't know anything about you, I'm afraid of you, and I'm going to put you to the side. I'm not going to include you in whatever is going on. I think we've all asked ourselves that question. We've all probably figured out that there is a God. We have different names for that God. Depending upon the faith tradition that we're part of, we ascribe different characteristics to that God. And the funny thing, over the thousands of years in which humanity has been on the earth, is how often we have gone to war over God. And it's not just the Crusades, and it's not just the 100 Years' War, it's not the Protestants versus the Catholics, it's not the Muslims versus the Christians. It could very well be a tribe from southwestern South Dakota against a tribe in central Nebraska. And that happened hundreds of years ago. But it's all part of those tribes' traditions. And so often we go to war over that, and I think it stems from ignorance. We simply don't know. We can't understand until we know. We're all saying that we're on a journey of some sort here. The way in which I prefer to phrase that is to quote Jesus from the Gospels. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one goes to the Father except through me. So the way that I've chosen is to follow the way of Jesus. Never do it perfectly. Won't even come close to it. But that's what guides my life. That's what guides me on my journey. And just as each of my colleagues up here has a slightly different guide to their journey, that's where I go. I think the value of this conversation here and the conversation especially with you is that we learn more and more about each other. We learn not to fear each other. So when we fear, we're at war. And that's not where any of us wants to be. I suspect if we asked all 6 of us here about whether or not the God that we worship supports a war or cheers for a war, the answer is no. The God that we all know is a God of justice and love and peace. And it's going to be very difficult to have any of those characteristics, to have even that state of mind, if we don't know a real person.
Before we move to the conversation and the question and answers, I have with me here Dwayne Vegley, and he has some good information to share with all of you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dwayne Vegley, and I'm a teacher at the high school here in town. I want to talk for a few minutes about an organization that is being resurrected, to use religious terminology. In 2007 and 2008, there was a group of about a dozen of us who planned some events, and we called ourselves the Winona Interfaith Council. There's a lot of people who, Hamid was a part of it, and Barb and Bhaskar, and many others in this room were a part of that. It was in 2007 and 2008, and like all groups of volunteers, the energy level and time ebbs and flows, and it kind of went dormant for a while. I met Mohammed and Carol at, I think it was the Color Run event in the fall, a fundraiser for the Right Ascent School program, and they asked about this event, and I said, heck yes, that's a wonderful idea. In the process of pulling this all together, we've had 4 meetings of anywhere between 30 and 20 people at each of those meetings, and we've talked about the idea of starting the group up again. So what is the Winona Interfaith Council? Right now it's nothing. It's an idea. It's a hope. If you are interested, on the way out, there are some sign-up sheets which are completely optional. But if you'd like to, you could put down your email address. And if you're interested in hearing about future events, this event was organized under the umbrella of Solomon's Song, along with the help of a lot of us who helped pull it together. But one of the things that many of us believe is that we need to learn from each other, we need to pray together, and we need to stand together. So a group like the Winona Interfaith Council would put on more educational events like this, working with Solomon's Song and other organizations. We would hopefully have some interfaith, prayer services or other religious services at both secular sites and hopefully religious sites around town. And we would also do things like either join existing vigils or create vigils where we'd stand together when there are examples of like Jewish cemeteries being vandalized. And it's not just in reaction to, the idea is to create vigils that are positive and peaceful and proactive. So if you're interested in hearing more about future events like that, sign up. There'll be both sheets of paper and also some computers for you to enter your information in. And at the very least, all it is an email announcement list about future events. There's also a space if you're interested in helping plan those events in the future, because the group is wide open to everybody else. So if you're interested in more information about that, talk with myself, anyone wearing one of the volunteer lanyards. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you, sir. We will move to the next part of the program here, and questions for our fabulous panelists here.
I'll start with a question. I'm interested in people who have converted to a different religion. If you would like to talk about your experience and why you chose to convert to a different religion.
I'm going to repeat the question because this event, by the way, is streamed live, and at this time, we have people from all over the world watching this. The last time I looked, actually, there is a lot of Canadian. So the question my good half here would like to hear about the people that convert from one religious to another, to talk a little bit about their experience. And I think my dear friend John here could address that part.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'm a convert, obviously. I guess I don't have a great dramatic story to tell. I wish I did. A lot of people do. For me, it was really, actually, I draw a little bit upon the Buddhist context in the sense that, for me, becoming Muslim was kind of a process of discovering myself. Being Muslim is really kind of the path that I feel works best for me. And again, it was a process of discovery of my own needs spiritually, how the path I need to follow. And a lot of that, like I said before, was simply the fact that as I discovered Islam, I discovered that the values of Islam, the values of being a Muslim, are very consistent with the values of Christianity and the other faith traditions, as well as just being an American. So, nope.
I'm a convert to Judaism as well. And for me, it was very gradual, again, in the same way that you're expressing it. I grew up in a very strong Catholic family, and as an adult was teaching CCD to children. And it was actually sort of a didactic issue that arose for me when children would raise questions about the humanity and the divinity of Jesus. And so my pastor at the time encouraged me not to have a lot of discussion about what Jesus must have done wrong when he was a young boy, or what was the more human side of Jesus, but to emphasize the fact that he always knew he was God. And I felt uncomfortable with that. And I knew that my friend who was Jewish and did Torah discussion in her community in La Crosse, they had what they called Talmud Torah, where they would discuss Torah, which as Catholics would refer to it as the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, and any question was valid. And so I just began going, just to become a better Catholic CCD teacher, I began going to study the Torah with my friend at her synagogue in La Crosse. And of course, the more time I spent there, the more I appreciated the way that Judaism allows you to grow as an adult in your faith. I felt like I didn't have that freedom to grow as an adult in my Catholic faith because of the fact that Catholicism is a creedal religion. So there are just creedal things you need to attach yourself to if you say, I'm Catholic. And because Judaism is not creedal, what becomes for us the way we behave is our interaction with the Torah. So we study the Torah and we do midrash all the time. We read a passage and we study it and we say, okay, now what significance does this passage have for me today? So we're always creating meaning. In other words, the Torah speaks to us, we speak back to the Torah, and there's this reciprocal relationship that exists. It was never present for me in my Catholic life. And so I feel as though it has allowed me to grow up and to be an adult in a faith. And that's a little piece of my Jewish story.
You just learned something, a fact that may be very significant to you. The largest faith community or unfaith community in this country today is people who used to be Catholics. And sitting here, we have one current Catholic and at least 2 used to be Catholics. So we're outnumbered 2 to 1.
I might not even need the microphone. Am I really that loud? I think it was really sort of that same kind of transformation that everybody else alluded to as well. I don't really think I woke up one morning and put on robes and shaved my head and was like, wow, check it out, I'm a Zen Buddhist. I mean, that didn't, even though it did happen, it didn't really happen quite that way. I feel like what it did, it kind of blossomed out of this natural progression of journeying, this path that we walk on. that you alluded to earlier, I think, is a really nice allegory to end up, or a nice term to end up using to get a mental image in my mind as to how it ended up going as well. But what the practice did for me was gave me a language to start to understand myself, and through myself to start to understand the world that I was part of. It's this interesting kind of dance that we all end up weaving, where we're all individuals that seem to be so isolated and non-interactive, like I'm different than you and you back there as well, but we're very much created in a way that links us together. Our biology, even sharing space in this room together, has an impact on us and changes us. And so much of my life practice was looking for a system that allowed me to begin to address that kind of interconnectivity in a way that made sense. And I think Zen, in that particular strain of tradition, gave me a language to start to address that, and a practice, really, less of an already painted picture, but more of a slate of exploration to start doing my own painting with, to start to figure out the universe that I was interacting with a little bit more fully. Hopefully to the point of one day, fully awakening within it and finding you all there as well.
If you would like, you could also write your question and send it forward.
I appreciate it. It seems the commonality with you all is the journeying and the growing and the questing. And I can remember some conversations with clergy in Winona talking about almost a fear of trying to stretch congregations too much. And people want to be comfortable and don't want to be on a journey, maybe. How might you think about that? Or how does that fit with this theme tonight, when there's probably a spectrum of people on these wonderful growth journeys like you are, and other people that just want to kind of hold back? I remember a comment from the Rick Warren, one of the prolific evangelical authors, that talked about kind of his concern about almost a spiritual infancy in a way. I think, Barb, you said grow up, it was just sort of like the flip side of that. That made me think of that. But maybe you can comment on that a little bit.
Thank you. Who would like to take that?
Well, I'll try. I think in the Catholic Church, what you say is true. We're all on a journey. But sometimes it looks like we're the only ones traveling. We don't pay much attention to the people around us. Part of that, I think, is the personalities that each of us has, and that leads us to choose a faith tradition. If you want to drive Catholics out of a meeting, tell them that the next topic is evangelization. Because Catholics, by and large, hate to go out and preach their faith. They will live it. They'll sometimes be so convinced that they're living it that it truly becomes part of them. But sharing it, share is a 5-letter word. In a lot of Catholic meetings, it becomes a 4-letter word. We don't do a good job of sharing either our faith or anything else. And so what you say is true. Well, we're still on that journey. We're still following Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. And we know that everybody else is going with us too. It's maybe like going through a big airport and everybody's going someplace, and maybe some of the people are going to the same place you are, but you wouldn't know, and frankly, that's not your concern. Your concern is your journey and your life and your focus. One of the things that Rick Warren and the other evangelical pastors that have been so prolific in preaching, teaching, and writing over the last couple of decades, one of the good things that they've done is they've made it polite to talk about religion. How many times have you heard, never talk about politics, never talk about a religion? Nowadays, sometimes it's polite to talk about religion. But when each of you goes to the home of your intended for the first time, that's the last thing he or she is going to tell you when you walk in the door is, by the way, don't talk about politics and don't talk about religion. So we sort of isolate ourselves. But maybe things are changing because of Rick Warren and the others like him, and some of the local evangelical pastors as well, that now it's become more legitimate to talk about your faith. And so people will stop me on the street and say, didn't I see you at a funeral at St. Stan's? Yeah. What do you do? I'm the deacon there. What does that all mean? And now we've got a conversation about religion, about my faith, and perhaps about that person's.
I'd like to speak to that as well. I love stretching and going deep. And if people aren't comfortable with that, I've discovered it's not my job to stretch anybody. So there are plenty of places where somebody might go to just be comfortable. So the Lutheran Campus Center is not one of those places. We stretch and go deep. So if you're not interested, you can come and get coffee at Mugby. But I also have found that it's not my job to protect the institution of Christendom, or it's not my job to uphold the church. So if the fear to grow up in one's faith, to stretch, to question is about protecting the institutional church, I'm not interested in that. I would rather struggle and get to something truer and deeper than protect an institution, which might put me out of a job eventually. But to me, that's more faithful.
So maybe I can add a little bit to this. I guess in terms of being comfortable, I was raised kind of old school Catholic, so I don't really like being comfortable. So for me, being sort of culturally Catholic was a very comfortable place for me. So maybe I took it a step too far. I really had to stretch way outside of my comfort zone to kind of learn more about, this new path I'm on. But one of the fascinating things about just being able to talk about religion and politics in this country is we have this amazing idea of American secularity where we can be religious in public, right? And there's a lot of countries in the world where you can't wear a cross or a headscarf or anything in a public space. But we've got this great idea where we can actually talk about this in public, right? So we can actually maybe, cross those boundaries or get, ask other people about their faith in public. And that's okay in this country. And that's something that we're really blessed with.
Sorry. We all have faith. Whatever that faith be, you could call it religion, but you can break it down in multiple different ways. We believe and we have faith that we'll wake up tomorrow. Where does that come from? We have to have faith, right? We have to have faith in our own bodily functions, that it works and will keep us healthy. We have to have faith. We can talk about religion at a very high philosophical level. We can talk about life, religion at a very spiritual level if you want. Or we can talk about religion in the practical sense of how we practice it. It's no different than anything else that we practice. Somebody studies physics, somebody studies chemistry, somebody studies computer science. No different. I practice my religion by praying in my language that I was brought up in. Someone else practices it in a different way. It's no different, except that's the environment you were brought up in, and your faith tells you, God, help me get this job. That's basically what we are living. So in some sense, everybody is following their own faith. They're practicing it differently, no different than speaking different language. We may not understand it. Hopefully, if we can understand it, we'll appreciate it. We'll actually enjoy it. In fact, I enjoy it because I know 3 or 4 different languages. I just happen to stumble into that situation. Every language is beautiful. Every language says the same thing slightly differently, but So religion too, in that sense, the way we practice can be different. What you just said is right. You are learning every day whenever you read something and you try to understand how it fits me. That's a beautiful way of recognizing the same thing might have been said in a different way in a different language. So we will only enjoy it more if we can understand it. And hopefully this conversation will help us enjoy that new thing for all of us.
I'm just curious, what, for each of you, I guess briefly, what the meaning and power of prayer or any similar sort of practice that you have is for you in your faith.
All right, I can.
We ask people to speak up. We can't hear about it.
Yes. Okay.
The question is about prayer and what prayer is significant for us in our particular path. And in Jewish practice, there's a joke because two guys come to the shul and they're sitting side by side, and one of them, they clearly enjoy each other's company, but one comes to daven or to pray, and the other one comes to visit with his friend. So prayer is something that you do in community. There are beautiful prayers and praise prayers and sung prayers and things like that, but there's also that whole very powerful piece of religious practice together that we call community, and that's one very important aspect of my life in my Jewish community is the things that we do as a community and the prayers that we say as a community. So when we sing psalms together, that's lovely. And again, for us, because we believe that the spark of God is in us, and when we praise God, we're saying, okay, now I'm sending myself that direction. That's how I need to move in that God-like way. Then there's might be somebody sitting next to me who just comes because they just like to be part of the community.
Sure. So for me, prayer is not the same as praying. And so prayer for me isn't just about saying words or reciting something, but it is when we bring our whole selves with such intention. So it could be reciting psalms, it could be making love, it could be making matzo ball soup for friends when they're sick. For me, our intentionality and presence is prayer. When worry follows you like a dog, as like Barbara Brown Taylor, an Episcopal priest, said, that too is prayer. So when you're constantly finding yourself thinking about someone, you may be praying and you don't even know it.
Yeah, prayer. How long do we have for this one? Prayer is really, really fundamental for Muslims. Really, for Muslims, if you don't do anything else, just pray. That's kind of what people say. Just pray. Just make your prayers, because prayer is transformative. Prayer is what changes us as human beings, right? So it changes us, and eventually as we pray, we change over time, and we're able to embody those divine attributes that God has. It makes us more merciful. It makes us more compassionate, more loving, all of these things. So, briefly, prayer is so important because it makes us, it changes us. It really, changes us into something more than just human beings. We're not just flesh and blood. We're something much more than that. And prayer is what makes it happen, really.
I think the answer to your question depends upon what you think about God. If you think about God as a judge, prayer is a plea. It's a begging. If you think about God as the person who created you as an act of love, who redeemed you as an act of love, and offers you love and forgiveness, then prayer can be a conversation with your best friend. but underline the word conversation. Because prayer is not just simply uttering words that you hope this figure you call God hears and understands. Prayer has to be a conversation where you speak with God and God speaks with you. And one of the difficult things to learn is that God cannot speak to you if you're still talking. So when I teach high school kids about prayer, one of the things I do is I suggest to them that they greet God, however they're feeling that day, and then shut up and let God greet them. Now, it's different, obviously. They can say these words out loud, they can think them in their brain, and God speaks to us in different ways. But I think the importance of prayer depends upon who God is for you. Is God a judge, a prosecutor? Is God the Father who created you, redeemed you, and who loves you beyond all measure?
I would agree with what everybody said. Yeah, it's amazing hearing everybody talk about, the idea around prayer. Yeah, I can't really speak for all Buddhists, and I can't speak for all Zen people, but I can certainly try my best, at least, to speak haphazardly for myself. Every breath that I take, I feel like ends up embodying that kind of prayer. That's what practice ends up being inside of our life. If you followed us around on any given week, you'd see it sitting in a zendo, sitting on a zafu and zabuton on a little cushion, sometimes looking at a wall, sometimes gazing down in front of us. But that's a laboratory we end up going into, right, to end up practicing being, practicing really engaging in silence, to end up hearing the rest of the universe and reconnecting with it. So in that sense, I really like this idea that, prayer is this really imbued activity. It's the liveliness and the enlivenment that we end up bringing that is both inside of us, that we end up doing, that, nobody ends up hearing and nobody ends up seeing, and that co-creativeness that we end up sharing as we end up moving through the various environments of our lives.
As I was a child, my father said, say this, learn this prayer, say it every day, it's good for you. That was pure faith. I did that, and it turned out good for me. So everything good that happened, I said, maybe because I said those prayers, right? So that was pure faith. I just followed it. As I grew up, later on I understood, okay, there's a poetical value to these prayers as we chant. There's a musical value to it. When we sing together as a choir, we sit together, we form a community. All those things were great. But I still, as I was growing up, even after I finished my PhD, I still wasn't sure, why the heck am I praying? These same prayers, I had faith, I did it, but I wasn't sure. And my dad was the one who told me pray. So I went and asked him. He's a guy with very few words. He doesn't say much. So I asked him, what the thing? There's this 45-minute long prayer, and there's hundreds of such prayers like that, and you're asking me to learn it, and all of them are saying the same thing. God is merciful. God takes care of you. God does this. He said, that's what it is. And I'm still trying to figure out what. He didn't answer me. But what he told me was, it is not that God is great. It is not that God is merciful. It is not God loves everybody. You should imbibe that property. You don't just say it. If you hear that meaning of that word, and you say, I have to help those who need help, because God helps those who need help. If I take those properties and if I assume those properties, I am doing the right thing. So your prayer is not chanting those things, but to pay attention to those meanings, to absorb those meanings if you can, to the extent that you can. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what prayers are supposed to be. Yes, you can enjoy it, you can sing it, You may not have the voice, but sing it, because all of us do that. But the point is, pay attention. So the prayer is, as you said, if God will take care of me, well, God will take care of you, but who are you going to take care of? Right? So flip it to yourself and apply it. That makes you a better person. That makes the society a better place, if all of us can absorb that. So that's why I pray. Not because I want something or God to take care of me. Hopefully I can help assume those properties and help somewhere in some ways I can. I'm just human anyway, so whatever I can.
I am interested in religion and politics, and I want to assure everyone here, if I were in trouble, I would want these 6 people in my company. But I noticed 2 things about the composition of the group. One is that there is probably no member of the clergy in that sitting at that table who would be in favor of Trump's ban. And secondly, there are 4 males and 2 females. And here's my question. Since it seems pretty incontrovertible that most of the religions represented here are based on scriptures that are fundamentally patriarchal, that it becomes very difficult to talk about how we are more alike than different. It's so obvious that male and female in these traditions are very different. And I guess I wonder, given the fact that people tend to think that their scriptures are inscribed in stone, how do we deal with that problem?
I will take this up to start. We humans have it's natural to take advantage of situations that we can take advantage of. That's how history has been. Men have taken advantage of the positions that they might have had in society. But scripturally speaking, if you look, at least in the Hinduism, there are goddesses and there are gods. So it is definitely not patriarchal. The scriptures are not patriarchal. The scriptures give the godliness to every aspect of life. I mean, you could say there's a male god, there's a female god, and there is animals that are God, the natural elements are God. No, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm just presenting my viewpoint. So, men and humans in general have taken advantage of the powers that they have to segregate within themselves, and definitely even in the Indian continent, you could go and say women don't have the same privileges and the respect that they deserve. And that's a shame. And it still continues. But to that extent, I can say scriptures don't have a basis for that. It's the human greed that causes that.
So this is how much time do we have now? What was so freeing for me in seminary was learning that the word for God in Scripture was grammatically male, not gendered. And so for me, God is neither male nor female, and that is why I will never say he for God. I use God, God's self. Sometimes I use she just to prod at people. Because for me, God is not male nor female, and we've had to push against that for so long. We still do. And I'm trying to remember if it's Mary Daly. I'm looking at Pastor Emily, that said, if God is male, then male is God. And that's how we have abused one another.
I would say, just in response to that, again, within the Islamic tradition, God is not male nor female. God is transcendent and above any word that we can use to describe God. And then Islam is specifically, and actually the Quran itself actually addresses this concern. People during the time of the Prophet Muhammad actually asked him, do these verses, does this message apply to women as well as men? And then verses were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad explicitly stating that men and women are equal. And God doesn't see our external appearance. God will judge all of us based on our intentions and our actions, regardless of sex or gender or color or anything else. So Islam specifically addresses this. And I would say that God is not patriarchal because God is above all of these things. But yes, unfortunately, human beings have been, and I think lots of different faith traditions, patriarchal over the course of time. And it's these revelations that were, or these traditions that were given to us that help us break up these unjust systems, these patriarchal systems, or these racially based systems of intolerance. So it's the revelation that's actually sent to us to set things right, to set justice, to establish justice in the world.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that, can you guys hear me in the back? No. Dang, I thought I was going to avoid the microphone. I would say that, we don't really have a deistic practice in that same sense. We have an individually driven pathway, individual in a sense.
Thank you.
Individual in a sense? Yeah, woohoo! Sorry. But also connected, in that we don't really separate ourselves from the rest of existence in that same sort of way. So the practice itself would address sex and gender would be sort of a non-issue in that environment as far as practice ends up going. The way clergy ends up working, the way, throughout history has been a journey of culture. I think, I can't really speak for developments that ended up happening thousands of years ago, but what I can say is in contemporary practice, in the Sanbo Zen tradition that really is the main tradition that has taken root inside of the U.S. in number. It is fairly gender balanced in that sense, that there isn't, as you would find in other places in the world, a predominantly male clergy. So I think it's a slightly different issue that it ends up being, in our practice as it ends up going forward. It ends up being a social and cultural question that we end up addressing as communities going forward, with personal and religious spiritual development practice being imbued as part of that. Does that kind of address that question?
Emilio, I would like to acknowledge that over many thousands of years in Judaism, the women were separated from the men. Again, as time has gone by, those traditions have begun to change, and now women can become rabbis. But what I would have to say probably is true of all traditions is that if we look hard enough, we find significant stories of remarkable women. And certainly in the Jewish tradition, there are remarkable women who were brave in moments when men were not brave, and so they took leadership. But today, a Jewish woman can become a rabbi. A Jewish woman can lead services. And as I mentioned in my introduction, our job as Jews, because it's a non-creedal religion, is to create meaning ourselves. And so within our communities, we are always looking at what our scriptures are and saying, is this significant to us today? How do we make this work for us? And again, in the Torah, there are 613 laws, and we can't even use half of them because they have to do with animal sacrifice, and there's no animal sacrifice anymore, thank God. And so there are some that simply don't fit because they aren't part of our cultural experience. But I would say that Judaism, in the same way as probably these other traditions, is seeking very much to allow women to grow. And I have found in my Jewish practice that I've been able to be a leader and an adult in my faith. So it hasn't stopped me personally.
If you read the Declaration of Independence written in 1776, you would think that women did not exist in this country either. It's just the way documents were written. It's the way the world developed. You and I weren't there to help the world develop correctly. Clearly, if we were, it would be different. But it is what it is. And I think the way in which Pope Francis looks at this question, first to look at it structurally, we know that one of the things he's done is to, again, inquire as to whether women can be ordained to the diaconate, whether women can be clergy. Don't know how that's going to come out. We know how it came out the first time. We don't know how it's going to come out this time. Church has been around for 2,000 years. It takes a while to get things done. But I'm always amazed at the faith that so many women in the congregations where I have been assigned, their faith, their willingness to do things that a lot of men wouldn't do. I remember some of the stories from the Old Testament where women were a lot braver than the men. But I've always figured that there was something there for these women. They saw some value in it for themselves, and so they went after it. And they did the best with what they had. And I think that's all God asks of us, is that God blesses us with gifts, talents, resources, whatever. And at the end, God asks us, what'd you do with it? Did you bury it, or did you use it? And I'm always impressed that so many women in the Catholic Church use the gifts of God to build the kingdom and to build the church.
I was just wondering what you might say to a girl that's been struggling with her whole faith journey for a couple of years now, and if you'd have any advice or insight to share about that, maybe with personal experience or anything with that.
Did you feel it? That I was like, yes. I would say truly that you are in a very holy place, and just to lean into that I can't give you an answer, that you will discover your way and have people in your life to walk alongside of you. One of my favorite quotes from this Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, is when the witch is trying to get people, the Narnians, to believe that there never was a Narnia and there never was an Aslan, which is the lion and the figure for God. And she kind of lulls them into this belief that there never was a sun, there never was Narnia, there never was Aslan. And then finally, I think it's Puddleglum, puts this fire out and says, even if there isn't an Aslan, I'm going to live as a Narnian as I can. And that, honestly, that is how I come to believe some days. I'm like, I don't know. This could all be a lie, but I'll gladly stake my life on it. And I'm going to live as a Narnian I can.
So I'm curious about how you all look at or view or how your faith views the house that God built that we all share, and that's the planet and the earth. Something that has been kind of driving my energies for the last 2 or 3 decades. Something that I think we all need to protect dearly and hold dearly. So how does your faith guide protecting the house that God built?
I think that may be the easiest question of the night so far. If you read Genesis, you read several times that God looked at what he did and saw that it was good. Then we read further in Genesis, and God turned the world over to Adam and Eve to dominate it, to keep it going. It was good. Do you think God has turned it over to Adam and Eve to make it bad? That doesn't make any sense to me. Pope Francis has spoken a lot on this question, as you well know, that we all, as humans, have a responsibility to the planet that we share. We have a responsibility to the generations that come after us, that we don't leave them a planet that is in worse shape than when we got it. That may be the simplest way to look at it. God gave it to us, it was good. If it's not good now, how did it get that way? And it certainly wasn't God that did it. So maybe our job is to come back and undo to make it good yet again. I think there's a commitment of that, to that on the part of the church. And obviously it gets all wrapped up in a lot of other things called economics and politics. And I don't have the answer to any of those either.
Judaism has a central core belief that is called tikkun olam. It means to make the world better. And it all through the years, Jews have been told you can't create the perfect world, but neither are you allowed to abstain from making a better world. Now, it hasn't always been directed at environmental awareness. It's more often been directed at social action. But I think at this time, when there are environmental issues, it has begun to take on that realm as well, varying, of course, from community to community. But there is a very strong belief in tikkun olam, of making the world a better place while we're here in Judaism.
I'd like to say, yeah, just within the Islamic tradition too, there's the sense of stewardship for the world, that God gave us. The Quran explicitly states that God entrusted us with creation. God entrusted us to take care of the earth while we're on it. Not just in the social and, social justice sense of taking care of other people, but also literally stewarding the environment and making sure that, we leave a good planet behind us and keep it healthy.
So, hello guys, I'm an exchange student here in Winona Senior High School, and I came from a different culture here in America, and I got to see how things are different and but actually we are all alike. And nowadays we have mobile phones, we have the internet, we have computers, television, media, and still nothing has changed. People still don't know about other religions and are not aware of stuff. And my region was shaken by war in the 90s, and as such has been a bit of controversies about religion and politics. So I kind of always wondered what makes us ignorant of other cultures and other religions with all the technology we have today.
Technology will not solve any real problems. I'll give you an example. In India, you have many, many languages. And when we got independence, there was only one television station or radio station. It was called All India Radio or Doordarshan. And what they did to make sure everybody got the news, they actually said the news in 5-minute news 12 times in 12 different languages and then repeated it again. This is exactly what happened. So everybody listened to the same radio station or TV. So to some extent, there was integration happening. They were all getting the same news and everything else. Technology came, like we have cable TV here. India also got cable TV. And what happened? You had TV stations in each different language. And what happened? People started watching, I know Tamil, so I'm listening to the Tamil station. Somebody knows Hindi, they're listening to the Hindi station. So what happens is technology actually separated us. It did not actually benefit the integration process. It actually helped segregate us. To some extent, relying on technology to solve human problems is not the right thing. Humans have to communicate with each other to solve problems that exist. So technology can be a big enabler, but we have to be taking the responsibility of using it in the right direction.
Hi. I'm a very strong Catholic student, current Catholic, not used or whatever. And I noticed that, and my background was different because I had a single mom and who's Filipino, and in Filipino culture, Catholicism is very big. But I see in American culture, especially once they leave their parents and they're on their own, that faith is not very important, that they were either forced upon, or they turn to a different religion, or they turn to atheism, or they're just what we'll call holiday Catholics, where they only come Easter or any significant holiday with their parents. So how do you, with every distraction that we have, keep the retention of the younger generations to continue the path that you guys have? I know it's a very generic thing, but with every even 5 years, there's always a new, app or social media or toy that we want, and it's just, I feel like it pulls away further from what we're trying to focus on. Because with faith, it's something that doesn't leave you; it's part of you. And I grew up I went to private schools, and for some, even if they didn't go there in public schools, I feel like it's even more of a challenge because you don't have that opinion, so that it's like they don't have the chance to even grow into it.
I think faith is such a personal path that if it doesn't take root when a kid is in his own family, maybe there's a period of time he wanders, and maybe he moves to something else, or maybe he returns. What I've seen happening with a lot of people is when they have a family, they return, because there are those important celebrations that we have for important moments in life that faith communities celebrate. By the same token, I think a person can be a person of faith and not belong to any particular faith tradition, but maybe come to their own understanding of God and their path in the world. So, and that isn't very encouraging to you, because I know you and here in the States we do see the churches and synagogues, the attendance falling back and enrollment falling back, and all I can say is it's just a very personal path that each person needs to walk, and I see the great value of that community faith experience, but maybe not everybody has that particular need. So I think, again, it just simply is an individual trip. Ultimately, if you face God, if you think that there's an afterworld and you're going to be facing God, it's not going to be anybody but you there. So you have to take that step. So
I would recommend that everybody, particularly like you said, younger generations, join a service club. If you join a service club, you will actually witness people selflessly doing things in the service of the community. When you see that, that is worship. You can worship at a temple. You can worship at a church. Though that's a particular practice. But when you are in a service organization and you are working selflessly and doing some service to those who are blind or those who are not as fortunate as you are worshiping, and you will become spiritually better. That's my take.
Yeah, I would echo that sense. It seems at times that you end up in an environment where people are losing faith in, the traditions they ended up growing in their homes. But in another, looking at the other side a little bit of the coin, it gives you a wonderful opportunity to end up having the kind of exploration that Bhaskar is, alluding to, that really these various spiritual traditions have been brought forward throughout history, celebrating that kind of selfless giving that ends up going forward, embodying this principle of, seeing that there's more to even yourself than just you, that ends up being shaped through the environments that you end up interacting within. And when you bring your heart into that environment, fully bring your heart into that environment, there's some magic that happens there, that maybe leads you back to what the tradition was and the tradition that you came from your family in that sense, or maybe allows you a gateway to a practice that you wouldn't have had access to in prior generations as well.
I'd say I'm a big believer in prayer. Like I was talking earlier, prayer is a transformative process. I think if we teach them, model that behavior, model that transformation, they'll see that and they'll come back to that when they're older. It's kind of like, like your experience was the same. Just do your best to teach those prayers and model that behavior. For Muslim families, we pray together. As much as possible, we try to make sure we pray together as a family, right? We try to start them on that path of transformation that's going to, comfort their, calm their hearts. And their kids, they're, really anxious or excitable and stuff. So teach them how prayer can comfort their hearts, and just kind of start them off on that path, because they'll come back to it. It's kind of like the Amish do, right? They let their kids run off for a few years, but they always come back because they've started them off on that path.
One of the things that I've learned that's been very helpful is that faith is formed through personal, trusted relationships and not through a certain kind of music or worship style or lights or anything like that, but that it is really about the relationships. So I agree with everything that you all are saying, that idea of service, of bringing your whole heart, of prayer. And I think for a while, in the church especially, I'll speak for the Lutheran Church, we relied too much on experts and had this idea that you have to be an expert to teach faith or religion, rather than just trusting the wrestle and the struggle on your own through relationships.
One more question? So one of the themes that I think we keep bumping into is this idea of social justice. And so a forum like this is in some way the form of social justice all on its own. And I know each of the faiths here has their own roots and their own traditions of social justice. And so I'm going to ask the panel, I know Barbara's already talked about this, what are those roots? And just describe them.
So the question is the root of social justice in each religious.
Social justice, to some extent, is a situational concept. What was considered to be just 200 years ago is no longer considered to be just. What's the origin of it as far as the Catholic Church is concerned? If you read any of the documents that the popes have issued on social justice, they all go back to Scripture. They all go back to a couple of fundamental principles. We're all made in the image and likeness of God. It doesn't matter if we're Jewish or Samaritan, we're in the image and likeness of God, the same God who made both of us. That would have been true 2,000 years ago. It would have been true today, whether we're Iraqi or Canadian. We're all made in the image and likeness of the one God. How we treat each other changes with the situation, with the context. The first major document on social justice in the church was Leo XIII back in the latter part of the 19th century, and he wrote about unions, about labor unions. Wow, it's still an issue in some places, isn't it? But a lot of what he wrote at that time became law in a lot of places. And nowadays, social justice is focused on different kinds of questions, different kinds of issues. I think it all goes back to us all being made in the image and likeness of the one God. And we would not treat God unjustly. We would not treat God unfairly. We would not forbid forgiveness to God. So why would we do any of that to a person who is made in the image and likeness of God? I think that's sort of the core concept. Now, we always tell Catholics that are interested in social justice, if you're truly interested in learning the Church's position on social justice, read a lot of the Protestant thinkers, because they know what we have. We don't. It's right there in front of us, and we don't know it. But a lot of the Protestant preachers and writers recognize the commitment of the Church to social justice. And yet we've had our issues. The Church supported slavery for hundreds of years. So social justice is a situational thing, and it changes. But I think the core comes out of Scripture and God's love for us and God's relationship to us.
The social justice per se as a concept, as you said, is evolving. But one of the principles in Hinduism is the principle of karma. And the karma theory says that you cannot be inert. It is your responsibility to act. First and foremost, you are given the abilities, and it is your responsibility to act. So being inactive is unacceptable. In addition to that, what you do will return back to you. So the good that you do will get back to you. So it goes both ways. One is you have to be active because you are given the abilities to act. And second, you have to act in the positive way because you act in the negative way, you get the negative response back. So that's one of the prayer. Karmanyeva adhikaraste means you are responsible and obligated to act. But in the sense that whatever you do will come back to you, so knowing that I want to be good because I want good come back to me. So that's one basis for applying and using it towards social justice.
The thought that came to my mind when you asked that question initially was this idea of, we have many faith traditions have the big holy three, we do too. We have Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, yeah. But I think this Buddha, Dharma, Sangha idea kind of falls strangely on us in Western traditions. We get a picture of a statue made of wood that, has some sort of personification quality that we end up imbuing into it. And really what we're talking about is we're talking about this idea of awakening for ourselves and for the communities that we're inseparable from. And being inseparable parts of those communities gives us a certain responsibility that perhaps you can end up embodying through that notion of karma as well. We are integral parts of that, inseparable from that community and our individualism even. The second piece being Dharma, all of the teaching and learning. That can't happen in isolation. Teaching and learning isn't static. It's not really best envisioned as being a noun. It's a verb, it's an activity, an exchange. And the same ends up being the case with this notion of Sangha. Yeah, Sangha can be a self-contained thing, all those various aspects that we get different vantage points to end up looking at that comprise what we commonly call ourself, walking around every day. Thoughts, emotions, feelings, arms, legs, the whole composite thing. The other part ends up being our responsibility that we end up playing in this whole co-creative experience that we all end up sharing together. That Sangha piece ends up really, again, speaking to the point of needing to be that community also doesn't function so well as a noun. It functions way better as an active verb, an interaction that ends up being lived.
What is the source of social justice in Islam? I'd say God's mercy. God is absolutely merciful. God is absolutely just. So we should also try to be merciful and just whenever we can. And I guess the flip side of that coin is oftentimes human beings are not just. There's a lot of injustice that happens. So God has to remind us all the time, right? God, that's why, from the point of view of Islam, it's a revelation is a series, right? People forget. We forget to be just, to love our neighbors. So God has to send out a new book. Hey, this is a reminder to you guys. You need to be merciful. You need to be just. You need to take care of your neighbors. That kind of thing. So I would say the source is God's mercy for all of us here.
Yes. Yes. And the source for Christianity is rooted, I think, in the Shema, which Barb talked about. The Lord, hear Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, the Lord alone. And love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, how that lives out, because God is merciful, we are merciful. And then love your neighbor as yourself. So I said I was a mom in the beginning of this. My son Micah is named Micah because of a verse from our scripture, which is, what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God? And then the blessing that I give my kids every morning is, remember you are loved, now go show love. And sometimes it's, as my daughter is running late, remember you're loved, go show love. And I wonder what people think about that when they hear, oh my gosh.
We have a famous rabbi, and everybody's probably heard of Hillel, and his famous comment was, if you see something that needs to be done, particularly in your community, if not now, when? If not you, who? So that's the Jewish take on that.
We will take one more question, then we will take the conversations to the other rooms. So one questions in the back there.
All right. Hi. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. As you were saying, the golden rule, love your neighbor as yourself. I guess as a young person who had a negative experience with family members using scripture to justify certain beliefs that contradict what I myself believed, and in a way that was not resemblance of love in any way. And I guess, how do you refresh your mind and look at faith a different way when having these negative thoughts and all of these negative views? How do you get past that?
My dear brave professor will take the question.
I don't know if I'm going to answer you or not, but this is one thought that I always carry and I try to transfer to others. We all have a spark of God in us, we are told, right? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. And we are also told that we are all the same spark from the same God. Okay, so let's assume that. So let me close my eyes and let me put my soul, or at least imagine, inside her. My viewpoint of this entire world would be completely different. And it won't be any less significant than the way I see myself right now. If I can do that, if you can do that, you can immediately, at that very moment, forgive everybody. That moment you will, because everybody wants to be good. Everybody wants to do it. But unfortunately, we are trapped within this. We are trapped within this. If we can even momentarily presume to be someone else, we will know that there's something there that I have no clue. But immediately I'll forgive that other person. That's probably the only way I can track that. Other than that, I am trapped. I have my own follies. I can't help it.
I'm going to speak as a grandma because as a parent, and I have said this often to my grandchildren, it's a lot easier to be a grandma than to be a mom. I think as a mom, you're very concerned about shaping your child in the right way. And I would say that probably what was happening for your mom and your dad as well was that they were trying to shape you, and maybe they tried too hard. As a grandma, whatever they do is okay by me. And they're pretty good. and I think what happens when you're a grandparent is you're filled with so much joy because you have this grandchild that they're so aware of that, and so there's just this rapport of love between you, and it tends to not be the same kind of tense one that can exist between a kid and her parents. So just find yourself a grandma.
You asked how do you get past that, and I think you are already on your way by saying, yes, that was wrong, and it wasn't fair, and that's your truth. And so I think that you're already on your way, and that you want to move past that is beautiful. And I think that, again, you'll find your way, as we shared with this young woman here, too. It was wrong, and keep making the road by walking.
I guess for me, for being a Muslim, we see people all the time. And if I want to see somebody who I think misinterprets Islam, I can turn on the news anytime and I can see that. There are, people who claim to be good Muslims doing horrible things. But we know, all of us in our hearts, as Muslims, we believe everybody, all of us, we have this spark of goodness in us. We all seek justice. We all seek love, right? That's natural. That's all of us, regardless of whatever. All of us have this, right? So for me, they go to the source. There's people doing ugly things in the name of religion. But if you go to that source, if you go to the Bible or the Quran or, the Torah, whatever that is for you, these are expressions of God's love, right? Again, there's Muslims doing horrible things, and they're claiming it's Islam. But when I go and I read that book, I don't see that. The book is clear. These books that God gave us, these revelations are absolutely clear that God is absolute love and loves us, and we know what that looks like. So go read that book again.
So
I would just throw in that I totally agree. Bringing up in a public forum like this, the fact that you feel that way is such an act of courage and bravery that you're well on the way to not letting that fall.
Thank you for our panelists here. This is our second event this year. The first event was Let's Make America Great Together. Well attended here at these great institutions, Winona State University. We thank them for allowing us to use this intellectual hub to share our knowledge. I would like to say thank you to people at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse who make this live streaming possible to all of us, especially Mr. Terry Workes. Also to the many people that's watching this from many different states and many other countries. We thank you, and I'm very sorry I could not get the apps done on time for you to submit the questions. We thank you for that. Thank you for being with us today. And we're more alike than we are different. Let's make that a movement. So while you're walking out of here,